for testing purpose, we want to on this, isn't it? We want to on this, right? So go ahead and create your multi-factor authentication. Now there is a requirement here which says that it looks like you are about to manage your organization security configuration. That's great. You must first disable the default security configuration. Because you are customizing your security configuration, whatever is set by default, they want you to disable. Okay, so we'll go and hit this disable security defaults, right? Say no. Why am I disabling it? Because I am using conditional access policies, right? So now you can create this policy. So whoever is part of that group, tomorrow a new user joins, just add him to that group, isn't it? Right? He will be forced to go through with MFA. So now you might understood, right? So which one is better, this one or per user? Obviously, this is a better solution, right? Okay. So this is how you can configure conditional access policies to enable multi-factor authentication for your users. Okay, right. If I don't want to give access to some apps to some users, exclude them. No, that's what I was explaining, right? So here, exclude those users and include those applications here, right? That's how you can attack, right? You can also exclude the applications, right? Okay. Okay. What is self-service? Doing things on your own, isn't it? If you go to a hotel, they say self-service. They put a, right? So if you go to your apps, you can add, no, here under the exclude section, right? Select the excluded cloud applications, right? Maybe for Office 365, you don't want this policy to be applied, you can add it, save it, right? Yeah. Okay, multiple applications can be the same credentials. Okay, so what is the purpose of identity as a service? What was our discussion yesterday? Where did we do? Yeah, this one. All these applications are not using same credentials. Yes or no? Right? They do. Right? So you integrate your identity solution with various applications. That is the purpose of identity as a service or Azure Adminitsrator. Right? Anyway, any other questions? Hope your questions are answered. Right. So self-service password reset or SSPR is a solution where users can reset their passwords on their own. For example, I forgot the password of my Azure Active Directory user ID. Instead of calling the service desk, if the SSPR feature is enabled, I can reset the password on my own. It is similar to, when you forget the, let us say, your, what do we call it as, Facebook password or your email password. What do? You hit that forgot password, isn't it? Right? So when you hit that forgot password, it will give you an option to reset the password on your own, provided you configured your secondary email or maybe a mobile number or whatsoever, right? Then only you can reset password on your own, right? Same. Or maybe you might have configured some security questions or various other methods of doing it, isn't it? Same here. So instead of you calling your service desk to reset the passwords, do it on your own. Right? So that's what this SSPR does, right? Now, what is the advantage of using SSPR? Why organization has to use SSPR? To save some dollars, right? How is that this is going to save dollars? Every Monday, whenever people will come back after the weekend holiday, right? They forgot the passwords, isn't it? And Monday morning, lot of calls to your help desk, right? Which means you need to deploy more resources on Mondays, cost to the company, isn't it? So if you have a solution like this, right, you can ask your users to reset on their phone, right? And of course, most of the companies are already using these type of solutions in on-premises, right? Third-party solutions are there, which helps organizations to configure SSPR. But this feature is also there in Azure Cloud. Okay. Now, couple of important points. Requires premium license. Right? Requires premium licenses. Without that, you cannot use this feature. Okay. Now, let us see how do we configure. What are the methods that which users can use to reset the passwords? Okay. Right. So, how to configure SSPR? Right. Concentrate. Go to your Azure Active Directory. Within Azure Active Directory, under the Manage section, you see this option, password reset. Okay. The name might be a little misleading, but that's how they named it. So SSPR configuration option is available under password reset. Right? Password reset. Okay. So when you go to this option called as password reset, right? It will give you an option, self-service password reset enabled. Is it enabled by default? No, because it is set to none. What options you got here? Enable to all the users in the environment, which means all your Azure Active Directory users. So do you want to enable this SSPR feature to all your users? Then go with all options. No, you want to enable this only to a group of users? Go to the selected. Right? So when you go with selected, it will be asking you to give the group name, right, to which you want to enable the SSPR. So let us say you want to enable SSPR to group 1, which means all the users in the group 1 will be having this option of resetting the passwords on their own. You getting what I'm saying? Vijay, what if you have multiple groups? Can I add multiple groups here? No. Create a group and add all the other groups to that group. Isn't it? Nested groups. Right? But here you can only specify one group. If you have multiple groups, add those groups to this. Right? So you can either enable to all or selected users or selected groups rather or none. So let us say I want to enable self-service password reset for all the users in group 1, which we created earlier. Right? So save it. Right? Multiple users, you have to add them to the group. No, you cannot add users here. You can only add group. Okay. If you have multiple users, the group users should be part of that group. Simple, right? Now, so this is enabling, right? Now, very important thing is authentication methods. Okay. How your users can reset their passwords. If Vijay want to reset the password on his own, he should prove that he is the right person to do. For that, these authentication methods are used. You need to prove that you are the right person to reset, isn't it? So then how do you prove? By using these authentication methods. Right? How to add multiple groups, I explained, no? I think concentrate, okay? So how to add multiple groups? Add one group in the other. Okay? Add one group in the other. Right? So in the sense, if you got this group and you got one more group and you got one more group and all these needs to be configured with SSPR, put all of them in another group. No, that's what I'm saying, right? Which we call it as nested grouping. Okay, hope you got the question answered, right? Okay, right. So the user has to prove his identity using the authentication methods, right? Okay, so what authentication methods are there? First one is mobile app notification, right? Mobile app notification. What does it mean? What it means is he get a notification on Microsoft Authenticator app. He need to acknowledge it. That's all. That is notification on his mobile where he need to acknowledge. Right? That is one option. Right? And he can also use code on his Authenticator app. Right? He get a code on the Authenticator app. Right? And he also can use email. So email is secondary email address. Secondary email. He can also use this option. Right? He can also use SMS on his registered mobile number. He can get a call on his office phone number where he answers the call and press hash. Right? So that's how he will be authenticated. Or he will set some questions and answers. Right? These questions will be defined by you and he'll answer them. Whenever he has to reset the password, he should be answering the questions in the same way whatever he answered earlier. Right? So there are 6 different authentication methods using which your user can prove his identity, after which he can reset the password on his phone. Okay. Now out of these 6, how many methods you want to allow the user to use to reset the password? Okay. So by default, it is set to 1. Right? If Vijay forgot his password, out of all these 6 methods, he can use one of these methods to reset the password. If you set this to, if Vijay forgot the password, he should be proving his identity by using 2 of these methods. 2 of those 6 methods. Okay. So the maximum number of methods you can configure for a user is 2. So more secure means give more methods, right? So, but he has to configure this, isn't it? User has to configure this before he can reset the password using these methods, right? So in short, you as an administrator has to define how many methods users has to use to reset the passwords, and you should also define how many methods among these your users are allowed to use, right? How many methods among these your users are allowed to use. Okay. Now let us say your company uses 2 methods, email and mobile phone, right? Your company want to use only 2 methods, email, mobile phone, or maybe the third method also you want to allow, security questions. Okay, right. So once you enable this SSPR with these settings, all the users will be asked to configure these things. Once you enable SSPR, when the user logs in first time after you enable SSPR, users will be prompted to configure all these things. Right? Otherwise, he cannot reset the password. Right? So what methods? Email, SMS on the phone, and then security questions. Right? Now let us talk about the security questions more in specific. So how many questions are required to register? How many questions he need to answer to reset the password? So out of 5 questions, if he answers 3 of the questions correctly, he can reset the password. No, you want him to answer all the 5 correctly? Okay. So now what I'm saying is, out of these 3 methods, user can use 2 methods to reset the password. You get it? Okay. Now if you're saying questions, then which questions? right? You're saying 5 questions. What are those questions? You need to define. So Azure by default provides you questions. You can select from them, right? So when you hit this security questions configuration option, there is this list of predefined questions. You can select, right? Maybe these questions. Your users will be prompted to answer these questions. So they will be answering the questions that which you define. They cannot select their own questions and answer, right? So all your users will be prompted to answer these questions, provided they go with security questions option. Vijay, can I only select the predefined questions? No, you can also create your own custom questions if you have a requirement. Okay, that is also possible. So now I am adding these 5 questions to this security questions list. Now what did we do? I'm saying that user should use 2 methods to reset the password. So those 2 methods can be email, mobile phone, or security questions, right? Say authentication methods. Okay, very important. Registration. Next option is registration. Okay. So when you look at this registration option, require users to register when signing in. This should be enabled. By default it is. Otherwise, users will not be prompted to register. So the moment you configure SSPR, user should be asked to register, isn't it? So that can happen when you say this yes. Otherwise, this option is an optional option, right? Okay. How the answer will be matched with the security questions? Okay, so we'll see that practically. Okay, right. Number of days before users are asked to reconfirm the authentication information. Okay, what does this mean? Every 180 days, your users will be asked to reconfirm the details, whatever they configured. Why this is important? Let us say Vijay changed his mobile number. Will he be able to reset the password? No. He gets SMS to a different phone number, right? So to avoid all those problems, you ask your users to reconfirm those details are valid every 180 days. That is the default setting. If you want to reduce, you can reduce it further. Very good option, isn't it? Right? Okay. Now, last option. Notifications. Do you want to notify your user whenever he resets the password? Obviously, yes. If there is an email address configured to his user ID, if there is an email address configured to his email ID, to that email address a notification will be sent saying that boss, you resetted your password, so that he is aware, right? Not somebody else is resetting the password, isn't it? Right? Do you want admins to be notified? If so, you can also do that, but we generally don't, right? So these are some of the options that which we should be aware. Okay, right. So now what did we do so far, right? We enabled multi-factor authentication for the users in a group called group 1. Okay, now, so let us try to log in with one of the user in group 1. Okay, right. So let us go to your Azure Active Directory. Let us pick, I think user 1 is part of it, isn't it? User 1. To go and look at the groups of user 1, right? He is part of group 1. Okay, let us try to log into Azure portal using user 1. Okay, right. So go into private browser mode. I think we already logged in. We'll log out. Okay, right. Try to log in once again with user 1. So this user 1 is now configured with SSPR. Understand that, right? Since he is configured with SSPR, whenever he logs in after the SSPR is enabled, he will be asked to configure the SSPR settings, right? That email or mobile phone or security questions, you need to configure, isn't it? Right? Let us try to log in. Password of this user. So since this user has got MFA configured, right? So he is asked to enter the code, which is 428594. Because he has MFA configured, he is asked to enter the code for second factor authentication. Now what does it say? We need more information. For what? To say to help you to reset the password on your own, right? Say next. Why? Okay, anyway, we'll try to authenticate once again. Let's wait for that to populate. Okay, so what does it say? Keep your account secure. Your organization requires you to set up the following methods of proving who you are, right? It is asking you what email address you would like to use, right? And it also says, I want to set up a different method, right? Right? What are the different methods you see here? Email, security, questions. Why phone is showing it is already configured? Yes, guys, why phone is showing it is already configured? Because this guy is already having a mobile number. How the mobile number is already configured? Because he is having MFA, right? Since MFA is already configured, that mobile number will be picked, right? If there is no MFA configured, it will also ask you for phone number. So now one method is already done, right? That's why it is saying green tick mark there. Now you have two methods. One is mail, the other one is security question. Out of these two, one you have to use, right? Out of these two, you can use one. Why? Because how many methods are required, guys? Here, how many methods you said to be used? Right? Two methods, isn't it? Right? Two methods you said. That's why you can at least configure two. Okay. So for this, let us say if you're going with security questions, then it'll ask you the same questions, whatever you said. Now he answers this question. The answers will be stored in Azure and they will be validated whenever user tries to reset the password with the answers whatever he gives. Okay? Right. So now I don't want to use security questions, rather I want to go with email. Right? Confirm email. Enter your email address. Let us say vijay@virtualvimla.com. Say next. Right? Say next. And this email address will get a OTP or code, which he has to enter here. Okay, so let us pick that code. Right? So this is the code. Copy this. Right? And enter that here. So once you enter this code, the email is added as an authentication method. So now you have a mobile number and an email. If this user forgets the password, he'll get OTPs to both of them. he has to enter them to reset the password on his own. Right? So user hasn't configured the security questions in this particular scenario. He used phone and email. Okay. Now he is done with the SSPR configuration. Right. So after this, if he forgets the password, he is on his own. Right. Right. Let us see how does that work. Okay. So let this get right. Hit done. Right. So let us say this user logs out and this time he forgot his password. Right. He is trying to log in. Right. He's trying to log in. Right. And this time, what is that? This one, isn't it? User one. He don't know the password. What does it say? Forgot my password. Right. He'll hit this option. Right. And where does he redirect it to? Right. So this portal, isn't it? Which portal? Right. Password reset dot microsoftonline.com. You can also straight away go to this and reset the password. Or you hit the forgot password, you will be redirected to that. Your user ID is already picked. Enter this code, whatever you are seeing, capital Q A 5. Is it capital V? So, right. So next. Oh, that's wrong. H K K 4 V. Okay. Receive an email containing the verification code. Right? Is configured, I will be getting a verification. Isn't it? Right? So if I go to my email, right, I got this email with the verification code. Isn't it? Put the code here. So one method of verification is done. What is the second method? Whatever you configured. Right? Now, phone number, whatever you configured, and hit text. Right? Maybe I think I need to put 0 here. Okay. So anyway. Right? Right? So I should be getting a text which I already received, which is 081891. Isn't it? Hit next. What does it say? Enter the new password. Right now, user enters a new password. Right? Hit finish. That's all. Right? So you are allowing your users to reset the passwords on their own by using the authentication methods, whatever you define, right? And the methods number of methods you want them to reset the passwords. Okay. So very easy configuration, not complexity. Just you need to understand how it works, right? Now, there are also some audit logs how many times this SSPR is used, which method is used, that data also you can get it from here, right? Under the usage and insights, you can see from last 30 days or maybe 24 hours, 7 days, which method is used to reset, what is the usage frequency, and that report also you can get it from here. Okay, right. So there is another small setting here, on-premises integration. This we will discuss when we discuss about AD Connect. Okay, so that is not needed for now. We'll discuss when we talk about AD Connect. Okay, but otherwise, this is what you should be aware when it comes to self-service password reset. Again, it requires a premium license. Is it possible to export the events? Yes, very much. You can export it. Right? If you go to the password reset, usage and insights, so there should be an option here, isn't it? Registrations and authentication methods. Okay, download option is there. No? You can do it from here. Okay, right. Yeah. Any other questions? Can users skip this setup? If yes, how to enforce the users? See, that skip option is only that skip option is shown because you gave 3 options. You're getting what I'm saying, right? So you gave 3 options here, right? In the password reset, in the authentication methods, though user has to use only 2, but you gave 3 options. Third one can be skipped. That's what it means there. It is not that the entire, setting up of this SSPR is skipped. No, not that. Okay. Will this cover under P1 license? Yes. So this is similar to your what do we call it? Either it can use P1 or P2, right? Both. Anything should be fine. Okay. Right. So if no questions, I'm switching to the next topic, which is custom domains. Right? Few things you can checkmate, right? Few things you can do it later. Small things you need to this thing check on your own. But anyway, let me show you the custom logs, right? So audit logs. So these audit logs again include SSPR related audit stuff. Okay, right. This custom domain concept is very important, widely used, and for hybrid identity solution, custom domains is must. Okay. Now let us get back to yesterday's discussion. Okay. Yesterday's discussion, when we were talking about tenants, and we were saying that whenever we sign up, along with the tenant, a domain name will get assigned to the tenant, right? That's what our discussion. And I was also explaining the name of the domain depends on the email you used. That was also our discussion. If you are using vijay@outlook.com, then the domain name would be vijayoutlook.onmicrosoft.com. If you are using vemula4u@hotmail.com, vemula4u hotmail.onmicrosoft. Right? So based on the email address you used, right, the domain name is automatically picked. When? For the first tenant. For the second tenant, what happened? If you recall, we gave the prefix of the onmicrosoft.com. Right? We gave the prefix of onmicrosoft.com. Okay? Right. So now, so whenever you sign up, right? Initial domain is automatically assigned, isn't it? Which will have dot on Microsoft.com, isn't it? It will have dot on Microsoft.com as domain name. So that's why all the user IDs, whatever you create, will have that on Microsoft.com, right? So all the users, whatever you created, if you look at the user principal name, all of them have this on Microsoft.com because this is the initial domain name. But companies want to use their own domain names, right? For example, simply learn, right? And they are using Azure Active Directory. They want their users to be user@simplylearn.com or .net or whatsoever, isn't it? Right? So then how do we, right, use our own domain names, right? So that's where this custom domain option will help you. So custom domains will allow you to add your own domain names, which means more than one custom domains can be added. Not just one, more than one can also be added. Now, the initial domain name cannot be deleted. It will stay as is, right? But you can add your own domain names, right, along with that. Getting? Right. So how do I do that? What are the things needed when it comes to custom domain? Let us try to understand. Okay, right. So if you go to your Azure Active Directory, so there is this option called as custom domains. You see this? Under Azure Active Directory, manage custom domains. Right? And you see this option called as add custom domain. You can add your own custom domain here. Let us say simplylearn.com. Right? Add the domain. Right? Now let us try to understand what type of domains can be added. What are the requirements here for custom domain? Okay, right. So concentrate. Okay, custom domain should be an internet domain. What does it mean? Yes, what does it mean? If it is an internet domain, means what? You should be purchasing this domain from domain registrar. Right? Who is domain registrar? Famous? GoDaddy. Of course, Google will also sell the domain names. And there were various vendors in the market who will sell the domain names. Right? So you need to purchase the domain name from the registrar. Why? Because it should be an internet domain. Which means if SimplyLearn want to add their domain name, they should have this domain name on the internet. Then only you can add. Otherwise, you can't. Okay, it should be an internet domain name. Okay, so then anybody can add this domain name. Syed can add it, Prashant can add it, Pradeep can add it, right? So that's where the validation comes into picture, right? So only authorized people should be able to add this domain. Otherwise, I can add TCS or Infosys or IBM or whatsoever, isn't it? So that should not be the case, isn't it? Right? So So who can add here is one part. That is understandable. You should have rights to add it into this portal, into this Azure Active Directory or tenant. But can I use any domain? Right? Can I use any domain? No, it should be my own company's domain, isn't it? It should be my company's domain. So then, how Azure validates that it is your domain? There should be some method of validation, isn't it? So that's why the moment you add a domain, for example, if you're adding this simply learn, let us say hit add domain. What does it say? Boss verify. It is asking you to verify. How is this verification working is, Azure is providing you two records, concentrate, okay? Azure is providing you MX record. Azure is providing you two records, right? And a MX record. One of these two records add the domain into your Azure Active Directory as a custom domain, add the record. Okay, let us put these steps here. Okay, so what is the first step? Purchase the domain, right? That is your first step, right? From the registrar. Then second step is what? Add the domain, add the internet domain as a custom domain in Azure Active Directory. That's the second step. The third step is verify or validate the added domain by adding the text or one of these MX records in the domain on internet. Okay, so purchase, add, verify. Okay, so MX stands for mail exchange. Mail exchange record. Okay, mail exchange record. One of these two records could be added. Where? In the domain whatever you purchased, or in the domain whichever you are adding. Okay, so for example, if Simplylearn has to add their own custom domain, they should be purchasing this simplylearn.com. Whatever the name, right? Right? Once you add that here, simplylearn.com, if you add it here, it is giving you a text record or MX record. One of these two records should be added in this domain on internet. Okay, so let me give this with a demonstration. I have one domain, using that I will demonstrate. Okay, right. So let us say you want to add a domain. I purchased a domain with GoDaddy. Okay, I'll demonstrate using my own domain name. If you have a domain name, you can also practice this. Right? I purchased this domain with the name called whatever is that, avd.co.in. Okay, so this is the domain which I purchased from GoDaddy, and my company want all the users to be created like this. Okay, user@avd.co.in. Right? User@avd.co.in. What do I need to do? First purchase this domain, which we already did it, right? From the GoDaddy. So I have this domain, isn't it? First step. right? First step is what? Purchase the domain. That's the first step, which we already did it, right? Companies has to purchase them. What is the second step, guys? What is the second step? Add it as a custom domain, isn't it? So what do I do is I go to my Azure Active Directory, right? Under the manage section, I go to custom domains and I add this domain. What is the domain name? avd.co.in, right? Add the domain, right? So now for this to get added, you need to verify. It's just added, right? You just see unverified, isn't it? So how do I verify? I need to add one of these two records here in this portal. So whenever you purchase a domain, your vendor will provide you management console. And in that management console, you got this DNS option. Almost all the vendors will give this option. Under the DNS management, you add the records, right? You add the records, right? What is that I am using here? avd.co.in, no? What is my domain name here? Same, no? Is there any confusion? Did I use .avd.co.in? No, right? Is there any confusion? It's same, no? Right? Okay. So go to the DNS of your vendor portal. And then what do? You have this option, you see it, add record. What record you have to add? You have to add one of these, either text or MX. So let us say you are adding a text record. Okay. So let us say we are adding a text record, type of the record text. It gives you the other parameters. Name is @ put that name here, @ value is also given to you. This one, ms equals to whatever they give, put it here. And then you can leave the TTL default and add the record. So once you add this record, what you need to do? You need to hit verify. So when you hit verify, Azure will go and look for this record. Azure will go and look for this record. Where? In this domain. If it finds that record, it understands that it is a valid addition. The right person authorized, whoever is authorized to add is added that domain. That's what it understands. So this record addition is only for verification purpose. So once it is verified, you can remove this record also, no harm. This is just for verification purpose. Okay, right. Let us add this record, right? Add record. Now what happened? This record is added into your domain, whatever you purchased. Right, guys? Then what happens? Go and hit verify. Now your Azure will go and look for that record in the domain and it finds. And then what does it say? Verification succeeded. Right? Now what happened when you go to your custom domains? How many domains are active now? 2 domains. Now can I create my users with avd.co.in? Yes, you can. Right? Can I create my users with onmicrosoft.com? Yes, you can. Right? Okay. So if I now go to my users section and try to create a user now, how many domains I should be seeing here? 2 domains. Now Vijay can create a user like this, isn't it? User1 @avd.co.in. Right? name of the user, first name, last name, and same options whatever you got earlier, isn't it? So you can add multiple domain names as well. You can add one more custom domain here, very much possible. You can add as many domain names as you want. That can be parent child, can also be possible. Right. So now, when I create my users, I'm getting both the domain names, but by default, it is picking what? On Microsoft.com. By default, it is picking on Microsoft.com. But I don't want that to be default. I want my custom domain to be picked. Right? What do? I make this domain as a primary domain. So go to the newly added custom domain, make this as a primary. Right? Make this as a primary. Right, guys? So now if you go back and try to create a user once again, this time it picks AVD, but you still see on Microsoft.com. As I said, this can neither be deleted nor disabled. It stays the initial domain name. But the subsequent domains can be added like this. And every company adds their own domain name in the real-time world. This is a mandatory step. Right? Can I add one more domain here? Maybe if I want to add one more, yes, I can add. Right? And you can have users with the other domain name as well. Right? Now this guy can log in, isn't it? Right? So now this guy, let us say user1@avd.co.in, he can log into your Azure environment like what a normal user does. Okay, so that's how you can add the custom domains. To summarize, a custom domain will allow you to add your organization domain names, because by default the domain name whatever you get is with on Microsoft.com. So to add your own custom domain, you need to purchase the domain from the Internet Registrar. Add the purchased domain as a custom domain in Azure Active Directory, and verify the domain by adding either MX or text records in the DNS section of the domain. Once you add that, verify it, Azure will go and look for the record here in this domain. If it finds, the verification is validated. Once the verification is validated, you can use that domain to create your users with your own custom domain names. Right, guys? That's what a custom domain is, and that's how you will be adding. Okay? If you got any questions on this, please ask. Can we use your domain name? No. Please differentiate between a text and MX record. Okay, so if you are into DNS management or infrastructure management, you know it. MX is basically used for mail services. Text is just an information kind of stuff. Now here, the requirement of those records is only to validate, nothing beyond that. Okay, so either you create a mail exchange record or text record, doesn't matter. It's just only to verify whether this is a genuine ad or not. Right? Otherwise, mail exchange record is a DNS record which basically tells what your mail server is. But here that is not the case. Here the case is just to verify whether the addition is right or not. That's all, nothing beyond that. Okay, right. Any other questions? Okay, so we'll get into our next discussion, which is You can buy it, just spend some 400 to 500 rupees. You can, I think, yeah, if you go with a unpopular domain name, you can also purchase for 200 also, no doubt on that. Yeah. Okay. So if you want to practice this, and in next lab also, you definitely need a custom domain. Okay. So remember that very important. Okay. So I just got that point strike. See, Vijay used this avd.co.in in his tenant, isn't it? He added this in his tenant. Okay. Let us say Rajesh is also trying to add the same domain. Is it possible? Can the same domain name be added in two different domains? No, you can't do that. Okay, so the domain name should be unique in Azure Active Directory environment. If one tenant used this, it gives you an error message saying that it's already used. So domain name used once cannot be reused even in different tenant. Okay, so that is something that we should be aware. So the domain names are unique in Azure Active Directory. Once used, cannot be used again. Okay, right. Is this clear? Okay. So now let us get into the next topic of today's discussion, which is AD Connect. I'll try to explain the, we'll see how far we can go, but I prefer explaining the concept and stop. But let us see. Okay. Practically, we may do it in the next class. Right. Also called as hybrid identities, identity solution. Right. Break or stop. So we still have an hour to go, mate. Okay. So please prepare yourself for one break in 4 hours. Okay. So that's how our general discussions would be. Okay. It's not possible to go with multiple breaks. Right. Anyway. So yesterday's discussion. Remember this, right? Can we copy this? Right. How do we know what level of access we have in the environment? We'll discuss that in our back. So yet to be discussed. Right. So yesterday we were saying that you got on-premises, you got Azure Active Directory, right? I'll answer your question, Pradeep. Yeah. I'll answer your question at the end of the session. Yeah. I'll pick it. Don't worry. Okay. Right. So let us say you got an on-premises environment. I'll put this picture once again because I'm not able to copy that. Right. So let us say this is your on-premises of a company. And let us now call this company as with some name. Okay. Let's say avd.co.in. This is their on-premises environment. Say in Hyderabad. Okay. Let us say so. For the on-premises environment, I want answers, okay, because we already discussed this topic yesterday, right? What is the identity solution you use here? Identity solution or service. What's the identity service you use here? ADDS, Active Directory Domain Services. So to deploy Active Directory Domain Services, right? So you need a domain service, domain environment. And what do you need in that domain environment? You need domain controllers. This is what we were discussing. I'm just trying to put that again here. Same thing, whatever we discussed yesterday. And let the domain name be avd.co.in. Right, guys? Now here you create your users, right? So let us name some users, okay? So assume that you create users, on-prem users. So you created few users like this, okay? So on-prem user 1 @avd.co.in. What is this representation called as? What is this representation called as? Yesterday I was explaining this. So like this, you created some users, right? 3, 4, and maybe you also got some groups, on-prem groups. So let us say on-prem group 2901, some number, okay? So maybe you got few other groups. Let us write only one. Let us write only one group. So you have these users and groups here. And we know the purpose of this is to authenticate and so on, right? And we use Kerberos and NTLM protocols for that. That's what our discussion yesterday, right? Now the same company has got an identity service, or rather the same company has got Azure Cloud environment. On Azure Cloud, they got an identity service. What is this identity service called as? AAD, isn't it? AAD, right? So now here also you will have some users, groups, and so on, right? Now the challenge with this, what we were discussing, is you got user ID here and a user ID here for the same user, right? So now the same user may have user IDs like this here, right? So maybe like this, isn't it? Right. Something like this, right? AAD user 1, AAD user 2, AAD user 3, like this, isn't it? AAD user 4. Which means on-prem user 1 has got this user ID here, but he has got another user ID here. One user has got two user IDs in this case. Which means users has to remember multiple user IDs and their associated passwords. For you as an organization, it is a lot of effort you need to put to manage both the environments, which means more cost to the company, lot of administrative overhead, more identities means more security risks, and for your users, they are also not comfortable because they have to remember multiple usernames and its passwords, right? So then how do we handle this situation in a better way? So that's where this solution called as AD Connect or hybrid identity solution will come into picture. Now what does this mean is, Azure provides you a solution where you can synchronize, okay, it is not migration, okay, so where you can synchronize the identities whatever you have here, right, to your Azure Active Directory. So instead of creating user IDs here, I am going to use the same user IDs whatever we have on premises on Azure Cloud as well. So I'm not only using the same usernames, I am also using the same passwords whatever this user ID has got, which means I am replicating the identities whatever I have on my on-premises Active Directory domain services to my Azure Active Directory. And also clearly understand that this entire replication is from on-premises to Azure Active Directory, not the other way. So the replication happens only from on-premises directory services to your Azure Active Directory, not the other way. Okay? There is an exception which we will discuss, right? There's an exception with regards to passwords, but when it comes to identities, it only replicates from on-premises to Azure Active Directory, right? So then, how do we deploy this solution, right? How do we deploy this solution? What are the things needed, right? Right. Identities on cloud are not replicated to on-premises. Okay, so that's what my statement. What you said is right. Right. So now let us try to understand what are the things needed here. Okay. Now, on-premises, you need to deploy a Windows server. So this is the first requirement. I'm talking about on-premises. So this is a Windows server. Windows, it can be 2016 server, 2019 or 2020. So one of these server operating systems, right? Using one of these server operating systems, you will be deploying a Windows server on premises, right? So guys, please hold all the questions till we complete this entire demonstration. Okay. So all the questions related to the replication, synchronization, everything will be answered, right? Please hold. Okay. Right. Because without this topic being completed, I know there will be multiple questions. Let us wait. Okay. Right. Now, I am deploying a Windows 2016 or 2019 or 2022 server on premises. And this server should be domain joined. Should be what? Domain joined. Domain joined. Which means what? Member server. Domain joined servers are called as member servers. Okay. Now, on this server, we'll install an application called as AD Connect. We are going to install an application on this server which is called as AD Connect. So whenever you install this application called as AD Connect, on this server, there is a service that gets created which is called as AD Sync service. Whenever you install this application called as AD Connect, there is a service that which is getting created on this server, which is called as AD Sync. Now this AD Sync will help you to replicate the identities, whatever you have here on premises. The identities, whatever you have here on premises, will be replicated by this AD Sync service to your Azure Active Directory, right? To your Azure Active Directory. And again, as I said, it is one-way synchronization. And this entire replication will be on a secure channel, which is HTTPS. Will be on a secure channel, which is HTTPS. Okay. Now, so this is at a very high level, whatever is needed. So what is that you need? On premises, deploy a Windows server. On that Windows server, install AD Connect software or tool, which you can download from Microsoft site. Once you install AD Connect, it installs a service called as AD Sync service. AD Sync service will synchronize your data or your users from on premises to Azure Active Directory. Those are the things needed. Okay. So now let us get into some detailed discussion on this as well. Okay. Now, so I'm going to write the steps here. On-prem configuration. What is needed on premises? Okay. Right. So first step, install a Windows server, right, which can and join it to the domain. First step. What versions I already listed it. I'm not going to put it again. This is the first step. Second step. Second step is what? Install AD Connect. So here there are some sub steps. Okay. So when we install AD Connect, what are the things needed to install AD Connect? Right. So what are the things that are needed to install this AD Connect? Let us try to understand. The AD Connect installation requires a database. Requires a database. Which database? SQL. Production environment, you always use SQL. Okay, but you can also use SQL Express. For testing or lab like us, we can use SQL Express as well. But in the real-time world, we always use SQL Server with high availability. That is what the requirement is. Then why does a database is needed for AD Connect? To store the configuration. To store the configuration, your AD Connect requires a database instance that can be either SQL or SQL Express. So most of the time, your SQL database will be on a different server. Generally, isn't it, in the real-time world? It will be on a different server, which means your AD Connect will be talking to your, or AD Sync service will be talking to your database, SQL database, right? What port? What is your SQL port? Anybody? 1433, right? And that port, your AD Syncs can be talking to your database. Can it be on the same server? You can put it, but generally it will be on a different server. Okay, so you will be creating a database instance which is needed for AD Connect. Okay, now second requirement. Okay, so requires 2 user IDs. It requires 2 user IDs. Now what are these user IDs? User ID number 1, on-prem domain user with privileges. What privileges? Enterprise admin privileges. With enterprise admin privileges. Which means you need to create a user ID here on premises with a permission called as enterprise admin. For those who don't know an enterprise admin, just understand that it is a super user account. It is a super user ID in Azure. It is a super user ID in your Active Directory domain services. So whoever is part of this group called as enterprise admin group, they will be getting full administrative privileges where in your on-premises domain. Okay, so on-premises domain user with enterprise admin privileges. This is the first user ID requirement. Okay, this is the first user ID requirement. You also need one more user ID. The second user ID what you need is So this user ID should be on Azure Active Directory. AAD user with global admin privileges. What is global admin? Highest level of permissions anybody get on Azure Active Directory is what? Global administrator. If somebody is part of global admin, he can manage the entire Azure Active Directory environment. Full access, highest level of access on Azure Active Directory. Okay, right? So you need administrative privileges on premises. You also need administrative privileges on Azure Active Directory. Right? Okay. Now, so whatever the name, whatever might be the domain name, you need a user ID with privileges. It can be with on Microsoft.com. It can be with the same domain name, whatever you have on premises. Generally, we go with the same domain name. Okay, right. It can be of different name also. This is the second requirement. Now, why do we need these privileges for these user IDs? Right? So understand that your service has to read data from here. And your service has to write here. So to read, you need privileges. To write, you need privileges. What privileges? On-premises enterprise admin, Azure Active Directory, global admin privileges. So that is your requirement. Right, guys? Now, so once you have these identities, during the installation of the AD Connect, it will ask you to enter the user IDs and the credentials using which your service will be talking with your on-premises identity service and your Azure Active Directory service. Right? Apart from this, there are something called as sign-in methods, which we will be discussing during the installation itself. But this is what is needed, at least before we start installing the things. Okay, right. I will pause here. If anybody has got any questions, please ask before I go with the scenario how we are going to demonstrate this. Okay, a network connectivity. Okay, so this can go on internet. This can go on internet. No, if you don't want to do that, you can route it through your express route or any other VPN solutions that we use, site to site or express route. So it can also go through the internet. Okay, very much possible. So in our lab, we'll be replicating over the internet. But if you want, you can route it through a VPN or express route solution. But generally, companies will go with internet itself. Okay. During the activity, what are the chances of the issue occurs? What will the impact? Something goes wrong with the organization. Nothing happens. Right? So you are just synchronizing. So there is no impact here. Right? So it's just a synchronization of your identities. But anyway, you follow change management and do it. Right? SQL should be installed on-premises server. It can be SQL or it can be SQL Express, but it should be on-premises. Right? If the question is specific to whether it should be on-prem or cloud, it should be on-prem because you cannot put your database here, no? Right? Your sync service has to go all the way, right, over the VPN or something onto your Azure cloud. So it will be on-premises itself. Okay. Do we need to configure custom domain? Yeah, that's a good point. Okay. Now, so I missed that point. So let me add that. We'll put this one, okay, on Azure cloud. This is on-prem, isn't it? Now I'll put Azure cloud. Right? So on Azure cloud, add custom domain with the same domain name of on-prem. So you got what domain name here on-premises? avd.co.in. So a custom domain should be added here with the exact same name, whatever you have. That is a mandatory step. Okay, that's a good point. I think I missed that. But anyway, you need the same domain, custom domain name on Azure Active Directory, right? Needed. Okay, so before you start installing all these things, here you should be adding the custom domain. Okay, right. After adding the custom domain, can we create same user on premises avd.co.in? Okay, so we'll talk about that conflict in the next week class. Okay, so during the installation, I'll talk on that. So if there is a conflict, how do you want to manage and so on, right? Definitely there is a possibility of conflicts. Then if that happens, what will be the situation? We'll be discussing that. Okay, right. Any other questions? Can we have multiple connect? So if you're saying if I have multiple domains on premises, can we synchronize to the same tenant? If that is the question, yes, you can do that. You can. Okay. So if no further questions, then how we are going to demonstrate this, right? That is our next few minutes of discussion, and we'll stop our discussion today. Okay, right. So guys, understand that we don't have on-premises environment. Okay. Now what we are going to do is we are going to set up this entire environment on Azure cloud itself. Okay. So this entire stuff will be deploying on Azure itself. Right. Right. So this entire stuff will deploy on Azure itself, and we understand that it is on-premises. We'll assume that it is on-premises. Okay. Most of you might not also have any lab on premises. So you deploy everything on Azure itself, and we assume that it is on premises. Okay, that is one. Okay, now, second thing. So in the real-time world, you will have a domain controller and your AD connect on two different servers. But since this is a lab, on the domain controller itself, we are going to install AD connect. Okay, so on the domain controller itself, we will install AD connect. But in the real-time world, you will be deploying a separate server and installing it on that. Since this is a lab, we are going to deploy AD connect on the same server where the domain services are running. That is the second thing. First thing, we'll be deploying everything on Azure. We'll install AD connect on the domain controller itself. But in the real-time world, it will be on a different server. Third thing, here we are going to use SQL Express in place of SQL database. But in the real-time world, you definitely use SQL database, but I will be taking you through the required things during the installation when it comes to SQL database. What should be the database instance name and other thing? I'll explain you, but we are going to use SQL Express for this demonstration. Okay, so this entire environment will be on Azure cloud, AD connect on domain controller, and we'll be using SQL Express in place of SQL. So that will be our demonstration in the next class. Okay, right. So with that, I am done for today. But before we say we can log out, I'll take you through few of the things related to the documentation. But in the meantime, if any one of you got any questions, you can ask. If any questions related to whatever we discussed